Racist judge finds black man, unaware he's a federal prosecutor. Jalen Carter stood in the packed Baton Rouge courtroom, sweat gathering on his brow as Judge Samuel Harrove slammed his gavel, fining him $750 for arriving 3 minutes late to contest a parking ticket. The room buzzed, but Jalen's calm expression concealed a storm. He wasn't just another black man in a worn suit. He was a federal prosecutor who had spent years dismantling corruption. This petty fine wasn't the end. It was the spark. What came next would unravel lives, starting with the judges. Jalen strode back to the podium in the stifling municipal courtroom, gripping his battered briefcase tightly in his right hand. Its leather edges were frayed from years of carrying legal documents across Louisiana. Sweat trickled down his neck, soaking into the collar of his faded gray suit, a hand-me-down from his late uncle, who had died broke but proud. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and cheap cologne, the kind of stench that clung to the walls of this squat brick building where justice was bent more often than it stood straight. His heart pounded, not from nerves, but from the slow-burning rage he had carried since stepping into this room. 3 minutes late, a delay caused by a midnight call that had ripped him from sleep. He had been on the phone with his team at the U.S. Attorney's Office, dissecting a drug cartel case that had its tendrils wrapped around half the state. A case he had spent 18 months building with wiretaps and sleepless nights. Now, here he was, forced to fight a $35 parking ticket slapped onto his rusted sedan outside his late father's barbershop, a crumbling relic on Claiborne Street where Jalen had once swept floors as a kid, listening to old men spin stories of survival. The ticket was a clerical error, a glitch in the city's system. He had come armed with time-stamped photos and a sworn affidavit from Miss Loretta, the barbershop's elderly neighbor, who had seen the meter made skip over his payment slip. He had expected to be in and out by 10 o'clock, back to his real work, but life, as always, had other plans. The courtroom was a circus, 30-odd people crammed onto warped wooden benches. The murmurs in the room were a low hum beneath the buzz of a flickering fluorescent light. A woman in a floral dress clutched a dog-eared Bible, her toddler squirming beside her. An old man in overalls chewed tobacco, spitting into a crumpled paper cup. Jalen set his briefcase on the podium and snapped it open with a crisp click that echoed through the tense quiet. He pulled out his neatly clipped stack of evidence, adjusted his tie. A thin strip of navy blue his sister, Tasha, had ironed the night before and cleared his throat. He was ready to present his case with the same precision that had taken down kingpins and crooked cops alike. He glanced up, locking eyes with Judge Samuel Harrove, a barrel-chested figure perched high on the bench like a vulture eyeing carrion. Harrove's graying buzz cut gleamed under the lights. His ruddy face was etched with 60 years of scowls, and his pale blue eyes gleamed with something Jalen couldn't quite name. Not yet. The judge's black robe draped over him like a shroud, his meaty hands resting on the bench, fingers tapping an impatient rhythm. Jalen knew the type, a small-town tyrant, drunk on the power of a gavel, the kind who had ruled over this courtroom for decades, unchallenged. Jalen opened his mouth, voice steady despite the heat prickling at his skin. "Your Honor, I'm here regarding case number 7429, a parking violation from June 3rd. I have evidence proving the ticket was issued in error, including time-stamped photos and a sworn statement." He slid the papers forward, his movements precise, professional. Years of clawing his way through law school on scholarships and sheer grit had shaped him into the prosecutor he was today. Harrove didn't even glance at the documents. Instead, he leaned forward, his thick neck straining against his collar, and cut Jalen off with a voice like gravel scraping concrete. "You're late, Mr. Carter. 3 minutes past 9. You think this court waits for you?" The words landed like a slap, sharp and deliberate. The air shifted as dozens of eyes turned toward Jalen. He raised a hand slightly, palm out, a subtle gesture he had used in federal courtrooms to de-escalate tense moments. "Your Honor, I apologize for the delay. I was handling urgent federal matters that couldn't wait. If I could just present my case." Harrove smirked, a thin, nasty curl of his lips that didn't reach his eyes. He waved a dismissive hand, the gold ring on his pinky flashing. Excuses don't cut it here, boy. This court runs on order, on respect. You waltz in late, you spit on both. The word boy hit Jalen like a gut punch. A slur wrapped in casual speech, meant to put him in his place. The room seemed to contract, the weight of it pressing in. A few people gasped, but their shock was quickly swallowed by nervous coughs. Jalen's jaw tightened, but his face remained unreadable. Years of practice kept him steady. He had heard worse, in depositions, in alleyways, in the echoes of his childhood. But this was different. This was a courtroom, a place where the law was supposed to be blind to skin color. His gaze flicked around the room, taking in the details Harrove had ignored. 2 white latecomers, a man in a polo who had slipped in at 9:05 and a woman in flip-flops who had wandered in at 9:10. Neither had been reprimanded. Their cases had been called without a single remark. The man had even smirked when Jalen was reprimanded, flashing a quick grin before settling back into his seat. Harrove's disdain wasn't about time. It was about who Jalen was, what he looked like standing there in a suit that didn't quite fit right. Jalen inhaled slowly, deeply. He decided to push back, just enough to test the waters. "Your Honor, I understand the importance of timeliness," he said, his voice even. "But I am not just here as a citizen. I'm Jalen Carter, Assistant U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Louisiana. My delay was due to a case tied to national security." The room erupted, a collective intake of breath that seemed to suck the humidity straight out of the air. A woman in the back dropped her pen, the clatter loud against the scuffed linoleum. The old man with the tobacco cup froze mid-spit, brown juice dribbling down his chin. Jalen stood taller, his 5 feet 10 inches frame suddenly commanding the space. His deep brown eyes locked onto Harrove's as he dropped the title like a grenade, expecting it to shift the balance, to force a recalibration. For a split second, Harrove's face twitched. A muscle jumped under his left eye, his ruddy skin paling just enough to notice. But then the judge recovered, leaning back with a scoff that rumbled from his chest, his smirk widening into something almost feral. "Federal prosecutor, huh? Well, ain't that fancy. Don't mean squat in my courtroom, Mr. Carter. You're still late, and you're still paying $750. Contempt of court. Next case." The gavel came down with a crack, splitting the tension like an axe through dry wood. The fine hung in the air, an absurd leap from a $35 ticket to a sum designed to humiliate. A message. Punishment. Jalen's pulse pounded in his ears. His fingers curled into fists at his sides, nails biting into his palms. He stepped back from the podium, his briefcase still open, papers untouched, and felt the weight of every stare in the room. Some were curious, some smug, some uneasy. The woman in flip-flops whispered to her neighbor, her voice a sharp hiss of disbelief, while the man in the polo chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. Jalen's mind worked fast, piecing it together. This wasn't just pettiness. Harrove had seen a black man in a suit, late or not, and decided to flex his power to remind him of his place. The disparity burned like a neon sign flashing in Jalen's brain. $750 for him, nothing for them. He gathered his things with slow, deliberate movements and walked out, the courtroom buzzing behind him like a hive kicked open. Outside, the muggy Baton Rouge air clung to his skin. The sun blazed down on the cracked parking lot where his sedan baked in the heat. He tossed his briefcase onto the passenger seat, slamming the door harder than he intended, and slid behind the wheel, his knuckles white on the steering column. This wasn't over. Harrove didn't know it yet, but he had just picked a fight with the wrong man. Jalen's job was taking down men like him, men who believed power was their birthright, who twisted the rules to fit their prejudices. He had spent years digging through financial records to bring down cartel bosses, flipping witnesses to bury corrupt sheriffs. A municipal judge with a gavel and a grudge? Child's play. He fired up the engine, the old motor sputtering to life, and peeled out of the lot, tires kicking up loose gravel. His office was 15 miles away, a squat federal building where he had access to databases, case files, and a fresh stack of legal pads. He'd start there, pull Harrove's case history, See what skeletons rattled in that closet. The fine was a slap. Jalen would swing back with a sledgehammer. But as he merged onto the highway, a chill crept up his spine, a whisper of instinct honed over years in the field. Harrove hadn't flinched at the title. He had doubled down.
No hesitaste.
No fear. That meant he had someone backing him up. Jalen's jaw tightened, teeth grinding together. He'd find out what, and when he did, he'd burn it down. What he didn't know as he sped toward his desk was that Harrove had already picked up the phone, dialing a number with a smirk, marking Jalen as a problem to be crushed. Jalen slumped into the creaky chair at his desk. The fifth floor of the federal building, a maze of beige cubicles and flickering lights that buzzed like trapped flies. The clock on the wall ticked past 6 p.m., its hands smudged with dust. Outside, the Baton Rouge skyline glowed orange through grimy windows, casting jagged shadows across his cluttered workspace. Coffee cups teetered in uneven stacks, their rims stained brown from too many late-night grinds. Legal pads sprawled across his desk like fallen soldiers, scribbled with notes from cartel busts and witness interviews. His fingers, still stiff from gripping the steering wheel after the courthouse fiasco, danced across his keyboard, pulling up the state's judicial database with a login he had committed to memory years ago. The screen flickered to life, rows of case numbers and names spilling onto the monitor. Jalen's eyes narrowed, sharp as a hawk spotting prey. He wasn't here to lick his wounds over Judge Samuel Harrove's $750 fine. He was here to hunt. That courtroom humiliation, the smirk, the way Harrove had spat out the word boy like venom. It wasn't just personal. It was a pattern, and Jalen knew patterns. He had built his career on exposing them, on cracking open the rot in systems that hid behind gavels and badges. He typed Harrove's name into the search bar, the keys clacking loudly in the empty office, and hit enter. The database churned, spitting out hundreds of cases spanning 2 decades, a digital record of the judge's reign over Baton Rouge's municipal court. Jalen leaned in, the blue glow of the screen painting his face, and started cross-referencing.
Fines.
Penalties. Demographics. His pen scratched across a fresh legal pad. The numbers were adding up. So was the evidence. At a crime scene, black defendants faced an average fine of $300 for being late, parking violations, or minor disputes. White defendants, barely $50, often waived with just a warning. One case, a 32-year-old black woman hit with a $400 fine for a broken taillight. The next day, a 45-year-old white man got the same violation and walked away with a $20 slap on the wrist. Another case, a black teenager fined $200 for jaywalking, while a white couple caught the same week got nothing but a nod and a be careful. Jalen's pulse quickened, adrenaline surging as the numbers piled up. 3 times the fines, triple the contempt charges, a racial divide so glaring it practically screamed from the screen. He flipped through the records, sweat beading on his forehead despite the hum of the air conditioning. His pen circled a dozen outliers, cases where Harrove had stacked penalties like he was settling a personal score. This wasn't sloppy justice. It was a machine, oiled with bias, grinding down anyone who didn't fit the judge's vision of the world. Jalen leaned back, his chair creaking beneath him. He ran a hand over his close-cropped hair, exhaling a shaky breath. He had caught Harrove red-handed, a paper trail of prejudice that could bury him. His mind raced, strategizing his next move. A formal complaint to the state judicial board? A tip to the Fed's Civil Rights Division? He could already see it, Harrove hauled before a review panel, stammering as Jalen's data dismantled his excuses piece by piece. A rare grin tugged at Jalen's lips. He grabbed his phone, thumbs flying as he drafted the complaint. He attached screenshots of the worst cases, his words precise, legally airtight. Systemic racial bias, evidenced by disproportionate penalties imposed on black defendants spanning years. At 7:42 p.m., he hit send. The email shot off to the board's inbox, and he leaned back, savoring the moment. He had fired the first shot, and it felt damn good, like landing a punch after taking too many. The judge wouldn't see this coming. Not from a boy in a faded suit. Jalen stood, stretching his arms, ready to call it a night. He had earned a few hours of rest before the storm hit. Then his phone rang, the sharp sound slicing through the quiet like shattering glass. The screen flashed, "Mom." His stomach twisted, a cold prickle crawling up his spine. Miss Evelyn never called this late. Not since his father passed 5 years ago. He swiped to answer, pressing the phone to his ear. Her voice spilled out, raw and broken, sobs choking her words. "Jalen, baby, they tore it all up. They're gone now, but it's a mess. Oh Lord, it's a mess." His knees nearly buckled. He gripped the edge of his desk, forcing his voice steady. "Mom, slow down. Who did what?" She hiccuped, breath ragged, the story tumbling out in fragments.
Bâton rouge co.
4 of them, boots stomping, flashlights cutting through the dark. An anonymous tip about drugs, they'd said, but they found nothing. Just flipped furniture and yanked open drawers, leaving nothing but chaos behind. Worst of all, they had trashed the barbershop photos. Black and white pictures of his father, razor in hand, smiling wide. Now they lay crumpled and torn across her living room floor. Jalen's vision blurred, rage and fear colliding in his chest like a car wreck. "I'm coming, Mom. Stay put," he said, already snatching his keys. Her voice dropped to a whisper, barely audible over his pounding heartbeat. "Be careful, Jalen. They knew who I was." He hung up, sprinting down the hall, the silence of the empty building mocking him as he hit the stairwell, taking the steps 2 at a time. His sedan roared to life in the parking lot, tires screeching as he gunned it toward Myrtle Avenue. 15 miles. He cut through the Baton Rouge sprawl, past neon-lit gas stations, boarded-up shops, sagging shotgun houses. His mind raced, connecting the dots faster than he could process them. The complaint had gone out less than an hour ago. No way the board had moved on it yet. This wasn't coincidence. Harrove had reach, cronies on the force, men who'd swing a baton or plant a bag of dope if the judge so much as snapped his fingers. Jalen's victory, the email, had poked the bear, and the bear had claws. He gripped the wheel, knuckles white. "You want to play dirty?" he muttered under his breath. "Fine." He screeched to a stop outside his mother's house. The front yard, a tangle of weeds and cracked concrete, was still lit by the pulsing red and blue glow of a departing squad car. Jalen jumped out, engine still running, and bolted up the sagging porch steps. The door hung ajar where they had kicked it in. Inside, Miss Evelyn sat on her floral couch, a frail figure in a housecoat, gray hair slipping loose from its bun, tears streaking down her lined face. The living room was a war zone. The coffee table flipped, couch cushions slashed. Glass from a shattered lamp crunched under Jalen's shoes. And those photos, his father's legacy, scattered like confetti. Some ripped clean in half, others smeared with boot prints. Jalen dropped to his knees beside her, wrapping an arm around her trembling shoulders. Her sobs vibrated through him. "They said it was a tip," she whispered, clutching his sleeve. "But they laughed, Jalen. They laughed while they did it." He swallowed hard, bile rising in his throat. He scanned the wreckage. No drugs, no warrant left behind. Just destruction, just sport. His eyes landed on a shard of a photo frame. His father's grin split down the middle. Something inside him snapped. This wasn't random. Harrove's name pulsed in his skull. The judge's smirk flashed in his mind like a warning light. Jalen had sent that complaint, thinking he had rattled the cage. Harrove had struck back faster, harder. The fine was just a jab. This was a body blow, aimed at his roots, his family, his heart. Jalen helped Miss Evelyn to her feet, guiding her to the kitchen, away from the wreckage. He grabbed a broom, sweeping glass into a pile while his mind raced. He had underestimated Harrove, thought he was just a petty bully, not a man with this kind of pull. Jalen's jaw clenched, teeth grinding. He'd dig deeper, hit harder, but now he knew this was war, and Harrove wasn't playing by the rules. "What do you think of Harrove's retaliation?" Drop a 1 in the comments if you think Jalen's mom deserved better than this racist payback. Hit like if you're rooting for Jalen to take this judge down. And subscribe because this fight is just getting started. Could Jalen's next move turn the tables? Or will Harov's next strike bury him even deeper? Stick around to find out what's brewing in Baton Rouge. Jalen Carter stood in his mother's wrecked kitchen, the broom still clutched in his hand, glass shards glinting under the dim bulbs swaying from the ceiling. Miss Evelyn sat at the chipped formica table, her trembling fingers wrapped around a mug of chamomile tea he had brewed to steady her nerves. Steam curled up in wisps, blurring her tear-streaked face. The clock on the wall ticked past 10 p.m., its hands bent from years of neglect. Outside, the thick Baton Rouge night pressed against the windows, heavy with humidity and the distant wail of sirens. Fury churned in Jalen's chest, a molten knot pulsing with every breath, fueled by the image of his father's torn photos and his mother's shaken voice replaying in his head. Judge Samuel Harrove hadn't just fined him. He had sent cops to trash his family's home, a message carved in broken picture frames and slashed cushions. Jalen set the broom against the wall, its bristles caked with dust and shards of glass, then leaned down to kiss Miss Evelyn's forehead. "I'll fix this, Mom," he murmured, his voice low but steel hard. She nodded, too drained to argue. Grabbing his keys, he strode toward his sedan, the jangle loud in the silence. The thick night air clung to his skin as he peeled out toward the federal building. By 11, his office had become a war room. His desk was buried under printouts of Harov's case records, and his complaint to the judicial board glowed on his laptop screen, sent just hours ago. The raid on his mother's house wasn't a coincidence. It was retaliation. Harrove flexing his muscle through dirty cops. Jalen's blood simmered, but his mind stayed cold, analytical. The prosecutor in him took over. He needed more than data now. He needed action. He dialed Mara Dixon, his supervisor at the U.S. Attorney's Office. He had her number burned into memory from years of late-night strategy calls. She picked up on the second ring, her voice a gravelly drawl cutting through the static. "Carter, it's damn near midnight. This better be good." Jalen didn't waste breath. "Harov's dirty, Mara. I've got stats showing he fines black folks triple what white defendants pay for the same offenses. I sent a complaint to the board tonight. An hour later, cops raided my mom's place, tore it apart on a fake tip. He's got the force in his pocket." Silence stretched. Then he heard Mara's chair creak as she sat up straighter. "You sure it's him?" Jalen's jaw tightened. "Dead sure. The timing's too perfect, and they knew her address. This was personal." Mara didn't flinch. A veteran with 20 years in the feds, her jet-black buzz cut and stare could hold back a hurricane. She had seen worse. "All right," she said, her voice clipped. "Bring it to me tomorrow, 8 sharp. We'll start an informal probe. Shake his tree. See what falls out." Then, after a pause, "But Jalen, watch your back. Men like Harrove don't sit quiet when you kick their nest." He nodded, even though she couldn't see it, and hung up. The line went dead with a click that echoed in the empty office. The next hour, he prepped, printing charts, highlighting cases, building a dossier thick enough to choke a shredder. By 1 a.m., he locked up, exhaustion tugging at his bones. But a flicker of hope burned. Mara's backing meant resources, leverage. He could feel the tide turning, Harov's smug face cracking under the weight of federal scrutiny. The next morning, Jalen strode into Mara's office, a corner suite overlooking the Mississippi River, winding through Baton Rouge's haze. She sat behind a steel desk, her suit crisp despite the early hour, flipping through his file, a pen tapping against her lip. He laid it all out. The tripled fines, the raid, the pattern of Harov's racism stretching back years. Mara's brow furrowed. Her pen stilled over a graph Jalen had drawn. Red lines spiking for black defendants, blue lines flat for white ones. "This ain't subtle," she muttered. Then her sharp gaze locked onto his. "We've got enough for a quiet look. I'll pull some strings, get eyes on his courtroom, his clerks. If he's got cops on a leash, we'll sniff that out too." Jalen exhaled, a weight lifting from his chest. "Thanks, Mara." This guy's a cancer, needs cutting out. She nodded, already dialing contacts as Jalen stepped out. The clack of her keyboard faded behind him. By noon, whispers hit the streets. A rogue blogger, some kid with a laptop and a grudge, had caught wind of Jalen's complaint. The article, Baton Rouge Judge Targets Black Defendants, spread like wildfire, citing anonymous sources and numbers that matched Jalen's data. The story exploded online, racking up shares on local forums. Jalen caught the article on his phone while grabbing a po' boy at a corner deli. His screen lit up with notifications. The comments rolled in. Knew that old buzzard was crooked. About time someone called him out. A rare rush of pride mixed with the cayenne sting of his sandwich. Harov's name was mud now, at least in the digital gutter. Jalen figured the probe would finish him. He left the deli, driving toward his father's old barbershop, a boarded-up shell on Claiborne Street where he had spent summers dodging clippers and soaking up stories. The lot was empty, weeds strangling the cracked pavement, but it still felt like home. He cracked open a beer from a gas station six-pack, the bottle sweating in his grip, and lifted it toward the sky. A quiet, "Got you, Dad," slipped out. For the first time in days, he let himself breathe. The sun dipped low, painting the horizon gold. Then midnight hit, and the world flipped. Jalen jolted awake in his third-floor walk-up, his couch sagging beneath him. Sirens, screaming outside. Red and blue lights stabbed through his blinds, carving jagged stripes across the walls. His heart slammed against his ribs. He stumbled to the window. SWAT vans clogged the street below. Black-clad figures spilled out, rifles glinting under the streetlights. Boots thundered up the stairs. His door splintered under the battering ram before he could even lift his hands. "Carter!" a voice barked, and Jalen froze, palms rising as a dozen guns were aimed at him. A burly agent with a buzz cut shoved him against the wall, cuffs snapping tight around his wrists, the metal biting into his skin. "You're under arrest," the agent growled, planting evidence in a federal case. "Cartel job. Your fingerprints are all over it." Jalen's mind spun, disbelief choking his throat. "That's insane. I'm the one prosecuting it." The agent smirked, shoving him toward the stairs. "Tell it to the judge." "Oh wait, you already pissed him off." They hauled him outside. The night air slapped his face as neighbors gawked from their stoops, whispers rippling through the crowd. Jalen's eyes darted, catching a glimpse of forged emails on a tablet an agent held. Emails he had never written, claiming he'd planted fake wiretaps in the cartel case to inflate his conviction rate. His stomach dropped, the pieces slamming together. Harrove and his allies had extended their reach beyond the Baton Rouge PD, stretching into the feds, planting lies that could destroy Jalen's career, his life. The blogger buzz, the probe, his moment of triumph. Everything had been a flare drawing Harove's fire. Jalen's cuffs rattled as they shoved him into a van, the door slamming shut with a clang that echoed in his skull. His beer bottle still sat on the barbershop lot, half empty, a mocking relic of a victory that never was. Harrove hadn't just struck back. He'd rigged a guillotine, and Jalen's neck was already in the slot. He sat in the van, head pounding as it lurched through Baton Rouge's streets. The agent's radios crackled with static. His badge, his title, his years of clawing his way up from Claiborne Street, all teetering on a lie spun by a man who had smirked at him in court. The fine had been a pinprick. This was a sledgehammer smashing his world to dust. Jalen's fists clenched, nails digging into his palms, drawing tiny pinpricks of blood. He had thought he'd turned the tide, but Harrove had drowned him instead. The van slowed, pulling into a precinct lot, and Jalen's mind raced, scrambling for a way out, a thread to pull. He had beaten worse odds, flipped worse traps, but as the door slid open, the agent's smirks widened. Jalen knew this was only the beginning of Harrove's war. Jalen Carter sat on the cold steel bench of a Baton Rouge precinct cell. The cuffs dug into his wrists, their edges leaving red welts that throbbed with every pulse. The air stank of bleach and sweat. A sour mix that clung to the cinderblock walls painted a sickly green, scarred with scratches from countless others who'd been here before. A single bulb dangled overhead, buzzing like a trapped wasp, casting harsh light across his faded suit now rumpled and stained with dirt from the SWAT takedown. His head throbbed, a dull ache from where an agent had slammed him against his apartment wall. His ears still rang with their shouts. "Hands up, Carter!" echoing like a broken record. The forged emails, the cartel frame-up, Judge Samuel Harov's fingerprints were all over this. A trap sprung with surgical precision to bury him. Jalen's chest tightened, rage simmering beneath the exhaustion. But his eyes stayed sharp, scanning the cell for any crack in the armor of this nightmare. He wasn't done, not by a long shot. Across the hall, 2 cops lounged against a desk, their radios crackling with static. Their laughter cut through the quiet like nails on glass. One, a stocky guy with a buzz cut and a neck tattoo peeking from his collar, flipped through Jalen's badge, smirking as he tossed it onto a pile of paperwork. "Federal prosecutor, huh? Looks like you're the one in the cage now, hotshot," he said, his voice dripping with mockery. His partner chuckled, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. Jalen's fists clenched, nails digging into his palms, but he kept his mouth shut, watching, waiting. Then he spotted it, a rookie officer, barely 20, hovering near the door. His hands fidgeted with his belt, eyes darting away every time Jalen looked up. The kid's uniform hung loose, too big for his skinny frame, and his Adam's apple bobbed nervously. Not all of them were in on it, Jalen realized, a flicker of hope sparking in his gut. Harov's reach had limits, and this kid was the weak link. Jalen shifted on the bench, creaking under his weight, and leaned forward, elbows on his knees. His voice was low but steady. "How do you know this is right?" he asked, locking eyes with the rookie. The kid flinched, glancing at the older cops, who didn't notice, too busy swapping crude jokes. "They're framing me, and you're letting it happen." The rookie's face paled, his fingers tightening on his belt, but he didn't respond, just shuffled out of sight. Jalen exhaled, leaning back, the steel chilling his spine. He had one call left, and he wasn't wasting it. When the stocky cop finally sauntered over, dangling a phone like a taunt, Jalen snatched it, dialing Mara Dixon's number, praying she'd pick up. She did, her voice a lifeline through the static. "Carter, what the hell's going on? SWAT's got you." Jalen kept it brief. "Harov's framing me, Mara. Forged emails say I planted evidence in the cartel case. I'm in lockup. Need you to pull strings fast." Mara cursed sharply and low. "Sit tight. I've got favors to cash. You'll be out by dawn." The line cut, and Jalen handed the phone back. The cop's smirk faltered as he caught a glimpse of the conversation. The steel in Jalen's stare remained unshaken as the hours crawled by, the cold of the cell seeping into his bones. But his mind was racing, assembling his counterattack. Harov had gone big, weaponizing the feds against him, but every move left a trail. At 5 a.m., the rookie officer unlocked the cell, avoiding Jalen's eyes as he muttered, "You're clear." Mara's influence had worked. Someone higher up had been spooked enough to cut him loose. Jalen grabbed his badge from the desk, ignoring the stocky cop's silent glare, and stepped out into the gray Baton Rouge dawn. The precinct's concrete bulk loomed behind him. His sedan was impounded, so he hoofed it 6 blocks to a gas station, the air thick with exhaust and the promise of rain. Inside, he bought a burner phone and a stale coffee, then ducked into an alley, popping the SIM card into the cheap plastic casing. His real phone was evidence now, likely crawling with Harov's bugs. But this was clean. He dialed a tech contact, a wiry hacker named Rico, who'd once worked for the feds before going freelance. The drop spot was set, a diner off Perkins Road, 30 minutes away. By 6:30 a.m., Jalen sat in a vinyl booth, the diner's grease-scented air mixing with the burnt toast aroma of Rico's laptop as it booted up. Rico slid a USB drive across the table, no questions asked. Jalen plugged it into the precinct's public access portal. A backdoor Rico had cracked years ago. The screen flooded with logs, raid reports, tip records, officer assignments. Jalen scrolled, his coffee cooling in his grip, until he struck gold. The anonymous tip that had triggered the SWAT raid? It came from a burner phone traced to a cell tower just 2 blocks from Harov's brother-in-law, Captain Dwayne Peltier, a Baton Rouge PD lifer with a rap sheet of brutality complaints that had been conveniently buried. Jalen's lips curled into a grim smile. Peltier was Harov's muscle, the direct link tying the judge to this setup. He took a screenshot, encrypted it, and sent it to a rogue journalist he'd met at a bar last year. A woman named Kira, known for digging up scandals and running a hard-hitting blog. Post this, he texted from the burner. Name Peltier. Hint at Harrove. Now, by 8 a.m., Kira's post was live. Baton Rouge cop tied to federal frame-up. The article named Peltier traced the source of the tip and left a breadcrumb trail leading straight to a certain judge. From the diner's cracked window, Jalen watched as the post spread. Shares climbed into the hundreds, then thousands.
Local Forum Liup.
Twitter erupted with hashtags like #BurningBatonRouge and #BuyoutByHarov. Strangers poured in with their own horror stories, fines, wrongful jail time, lives ruined by Harov's rulings. Jalen's grin widened, a rare flash of teeth in the dim light. He had hit Harrove where it hurt, cracking his armor and turning the city's attention against him. The probe Mara had initiated would feast on this, and Jalen could almost hear the judge's chair creaking as he squirmed. He ditched the burner in a trash can, paid for his coffee with crumpled bills, and stepped outside into the drizzle slicking the streets, feeling the weight lift, if only for a moment. He had flipped the script. Harov's move had backfired. Jalen was free, fighting, winning. Then his real phone buzzed, the one they'd returned with his badge at the precinct. He had powered it up on the walk, figuring it was safe enough now. The screen flashed, "Mom again." His stomach dropped. The coffee soured in his throat. He answered, his voice tight. "Mom? You okay?" Miss Evelyn's reply was a whisper, hoarse, panicked. "Jalen, the house. It's burning. I got out, but it's all gone." He froze. Rain streaked his face, the diner's neon sign flickering behind him. "What? When?" She coughed, ragged and raw. "Just now. Fire trucks are here, but it's too late. Someone did this, Jalen. I saw a shadow running." His knees buckled, the phone slipping in his grip. Arson. Harrove hadn't stopped at the raid. He had torched Miss Evelyn's home. Their history, everything. Jalen's victory, that blog post, it had lit a match and Harrove had poured gasoline on it. "I'm coming, Mom. Stay with the neighbors." He hung up, sprinting toward a cab idling across the street. His soaked suit clung to him like a second skin. The journalist's post still glowed on his phone, a hollow triumph now, as smoke rose somewhere in Baton Rouge, carrying his past with it. Harrove wasn't just retaliating. He was burning Jalen's world to ash. Jalen Carter ran through the rain-slicked streets of Baton Rouge, his soaked suit sticking to his skin. The cab he had flagged down faded into the drizzle as he leapt out 3 blocks from Myrtle Avenue. Smoke stung his eyes before he even saw the flames. A thick, acrid haze rolled over the rooftops, curling into the night sky like a beast clawing free. His lungs burned as he rounded the corner, the glow of his mother's house slamming into him like a punch. Orange tongues of fire devoured the little shotgun shack where he had grown up. Firefighters swarmed the yard, hoses blasting water in hissing arcs against the blaze. But the roof was already caving in, shingles popping and cracking like gunfire. Jalen's knees hit the wet grass. His breath came ragged as he spotted Miss Evelyn huddled under a neighbor's porch, a blanket draped over her frail shoulders, her face streaked with soot and tears. The crowd buzzed, voices a dull roar beneath the sirens. But all he heard was her cough, raw and hacking. He stumbled toward her, dropping beside her on the splintered wood. "Mom, you're okay? You're okay." His voice cracked as he pulled her close. She clutched his arm, her nails digging through his sleeve, and whispered, "I saw him, Jalen." His head snapped up, scanning the shadows beyond the firelight. "A man in a hood," she rasped, "running out back, right before it started." Her words cut through the chaos like a blade. Jalen's heart pounded. The figure was gone now, but real. A spark of proof that this wasn't an accident. This was arson. Harrove had gone beyond destroying evidence. He had burned everything Jalen had left of his father. Every photo, every scrap of his childhood. The case files he'd hidden there. Parking ticket papers, Miss Loretta's affidavit. All reduced to ash, floating in the wind, stinging his face. Jalen tightened his grip on Miss Evelyn as her coughing racked her frail frame. His voice was low, steady, steel-hard. "I'll get him, Mom. I swear." She nodded weakly, too drained to speak, and Jalen's resolve hardened, forged in the heat of that fire. He stood, helping her to her feet, and guided her to Miss Loretta's house next door, a weathered duplex with faded yellow paint. The old woman waited on the porch, her cane tapping against the wooden planks as she waved them inside. "She's staying with me," Loretta declared, her voice firm despite her 80 years. Jalen nodded, grateful but weighed down by guilt. This was his battle, his stand against Harrove, yet his mother was the one suffering for it. He left her there, safe but shaken, and turned back toward the burning wreckage, watching as firefighters struggled against the blaze. The house crumbled into a smoldering heap of embers. His fists clenched, nails digging into his palms until they broke the skin, but he barely felt the sting. The blog post exposing Harrove's brother-in-law, the tip that framed him, had made an impact, but not enough. Harrove wasn't retreating. He was escalating, turning Jalen's life into an inferno. That courtroom smirk flashed through Jalen's mind, the judge's smug, knowing sneer, and he realized he couldn't wait for Mara's investigation or the feds to take action. He had to move now, face to face, and make Harrove feel the flames himself. By 9 p.m., Jalen was cleaned up. A borrowed shirt from Loretta's grandson stretched tight across his shoulders, his suit replaced with jeans and a jacket that concealed the bruises darkening his arms. Word from a courthouse clerk said Harrove was at a city gala, one of those high-profile affairs at the Belle of Baton Rouge Casino, a glitzy tower downtown where the city's elite toasted champagne and congratulated themselves. Jalen drove there in Loretta's old Buick, the engine rattling like a tin can full of bolts. His burner phone buzzed Mara again. "Lay low. We're digging." He ignored it. Parking a block away, he stepped into the neon glow reflecting off the wet pavement. The air inside was thick with cigar smoke and expensive perfume, chandeliers dripping with crystal overhead. Men in tuxedos and women in shimmering gowns mingled, their laughter a low murmur beneath the smooth jazz playing in the background. Jalen kept his badge in his pocket, a golden symbol of the years he'd fought to earn it, and held it tight, a weapon for what came next. He spotted Harrove near the bar, his broad chest straining against a custom-tailored suit, silver buzz cut catching the light as he clinked glasses with a city councilman. His laughter boomed over the music. Jalen's pulse pounded. Every step toward the judge was a countdown. The crowd parted like water around a shark. He stopped 5 feet away, his voice cutting through the noise, steady, unwavering. "Judge Harrove, we need to talk." Heads turned, murmurs rippling through the room. Harrove froze, his glass hovering near his lips. His sharp blue eyes locked onto Jalen, narrowing in recognition. The councilman stepped away, sensing the shift in tension. Harrove set his drink down, slow and deliberate, his smirk creeping back into place. "Mr. Carter," he drawled, his tone dripping with mock amusement. "Ain't this a surprise? You clean up well, for a man who's been stirring up trouble." Jalen pulled his badge, raising it high, its gold surface gleaming under the chandeliers. "You burned my mother's house down tonight," he said coldly. "Sent one of your thugs to do it. I know it was you." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, glasses clinking as hands trembled. Harrove paled, his ruddy face draining to an ashen gray. But he recovered quickly, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You got no proof, boy, and I don't take kindly to false accusations. You're out of your league." Jalen didn't flinch. He held his badge steady, his other hand jabbing at Harrove's chest. "I've got your brother-in-law's tip-off on my setup. I've got a trail of fines and corruption leading straight to you. And now, arson. You're finished, Harrove. The feds are coming. The room recoiled. Whispers surged into a wave of noise. Phones were pulled out, recording the exchange as Harrove's smirk wavered. His fists clenched at his sides. Jalin felt the shift. He had him. The judge's armor was cracking, his empire trembling beneath the weight of exposed secrets. For the first time, Jalin stood taller, a David hurling stones at a Goliath who had finally stumbled. Then he turned, leaving the room buzzing with the aftermath, victory thrumming in his veins. He climbed into the Buick, the engine coughing to life. The casino's glow faded in his rearview mirror, raindrops drumming against the roof. His phone buzzed again, Mara. He ignored it. Headlights flared behind him. Too close, too fast. Before he could react, a truck slammed into his rear bumper. The impact was a thunderclap, snapping his head forward. The windshield fractured into a spiderweb of cracks. The Buick skidded, tires shrieking on the rain-slick asphalt. Jalin wrestled the wheel, heart hammering, but the truck rammed him again. Harder, shoving him toward the bridge railing. Metal crunched. Sparks flew. The guardrail buckled. Then gravity took hold. The Buick plunged off the edge, tumbling into the Mississippi River below. Water crashed in, cold, suffocating blackness swallowing him whole. The truck's taillights vanished into the night above as the current yanked him downward. Jalin kicked at the window, his heel shattering the glass, but the river's pull was relentless. His badge sank beside him, vanishing into the murky abyss. The triumph of the gala was gone. Drowned. Harrove hadn't just stumbled. He had struck back. Kill shot. Jalin's lungs burned as the car dragged him deeper. His chest screamed for air, bubbles spiraling toward the surface. His vision blurred. The casino lights were a distant memory now. Harrove's smirk flickered in his mind. Those cold eyes. A man who would rather kill than lose. Jalin's fingers clawed at his seatbelt. The buckle jammed, his strength fading as the Mississippi River closed in. He had pushed too hard, too fast, and now he was paying the price. The roar of the gala was replaced by the silence of the river. His mother's cough echoed in his mind, her house reduced to ash, and now he was sinking. A federal prosecutor turned prey. The truck's driver, Harrove's pawn, had vanished, leaving Jalin to drown. A final twist of the judge's knife in a war that wouldn't end here. Jalin Carter thrashed in the icy grip of the Mississippi River, water flooding the Buick's cabin, a black torrent roaring through the shattered windshield as the car sank deeper into the muddy depths. His lungs screamed, a fire igniting in his chest as he clawed at the seatbelt. The buckle was stuck tight, cutting into his ribs with every desperate yank. The cold numbed his fingers, making them clumsy, and his vision blurred. The world shrank to a haze of bubbles and shadows as the river swallowed him whole. His soaked jeans clung to his legs, heavy as lead, and the borrowed jacket twisted around his arms. A straitjacket in the dark. The truck's second ram had sent him off the bridge. A deliberate kill shot from Judge Samuel Harrove's playbook. Now the current dragged him down, the weight of the car and the anchor pulling him to the bottom. His badge, his lifeline, slipped from his pocket, gleaming gold as it spiraled away, lost to the muck. Panic clawed at his throat, but Jalin's mind snapped sharp, years of survival instincts kicking in. He wasn't dying here, not like this, not while Harrove smirked free. He braced his feet against the dash, the cracked plastic buckling under his sneakers, and kicked at the driver's side window. The glass, already weakened from his previous hit, cracked wide after a second blow, shards exploding outward as water surged harder, slamming him back against the seat. His lungs burned, air long gone, and dizziness tugged at him, pulling him toward unconsciousness. With one final surge, he shoved through the gap, jagged edges slicing his palms, blood clouding the water in red wisps as he clawed upward. The river fought him, currents twisting like hands, yanking him down. But Jalin swam, legs pumping, arms slicing through the murk. His chest convulsed, begging for breath, and just as his strength faltered, his head broke the surface with a gasp. pulling in the damp Baton Rouge night air. Rain pelted his face, mixing with the river water, and he coughed, choking on the taste of silt and gasoline. Treading water, he watched as the Buick vanished below. Headlights flashed along the bridge above. The truck gone, its driver a ghost in Harov's army. Jalen's arms trembled, exhaustion sinking into his bones. But then he spotted a figure on the bank, a silhouette against the firelight still glowing from his mother's torched house, miles away. A fisherman, grizzled and wiry, waved a lantern, his skiff bobbing in the shallows. "Over here, son," the man shouted, his voice rough as gravel, and Jalen swam toward him, each stroke a battle against the river's pull. The old man tossed a rope, frayed but sturdy, and Jalen grabbed it, his sliced hands stinging as he hauled himself in. Rough hands yanked him aboard the skiff, rocking under his weight. Jalen collapsed onto the splintered deck, shivering, bruised, and alive. The fisherman, his face creased like old leather, handed him a threadbare blanket, muttering, "Saw that truck ram you. Damn near called the cops, but they ain't worth a damn around here." Jalen nodded, teeth chattering, and wrapped the blanket tight, the wool scratching his skin as he caught his breath. The skiff puttered to a dock, the fisherman dropping him off with a grunt and a good luck before vanishing back into the night. Jalen stumbled ashore, mud sucking at his sneakers, and limped to a motel 2 miles downriver. A neon-lit dive called the Bayou Rest. The place had cracked stucco walls and a vending machine humming in the lot. He paid cash for a room, $30 from a soggy wad in his pocket, and locked the door behind him. The stale air was thick with cigarette smoke and mildew as he peeled off his drenched clothes. Standing under a lukewarm shower, the cuts on his hands stung as water washed away blood and grime. Wrapped in a thin towel, he sat on the sagging bed, its springs groaning, and pieced it together. The truck hadn't been random. It was Harov's next move, a hit ordered after that gala confrontation. He rummaged through the room, finding a notepad and a stubby pencil, and began scribbling truck, bridge, timing. Then it hit him. Harov's cousin, Bobby Ray, owned a towing outfit, a greasy lot off Highway 12, known for scrapping wrecks with no questions asked.
Jalen's scoot twisted.
That's where the truck would go. He needed proof fast. His burner phone was gone, sunk with the Buick, but the motel had a payphone in the hall. The receiver was sticky with grime. He dialed Mara Dixon. Quarter coins clinked as her voice crackled through. "Jalen, where the hell have you been? Calling all night." He kept it short, his voice hoarse. "Harov tried to kill me. The truck ran me off the bridge after I called him out at the gala. I'm alive at a motel. Think it's his cousin Bobby Ray's rig." Mara's breath hissed, sharp.
Jesus, Carter.
"Stay put. I'm rallying the feds. We'll hit Bobby's lot, nail this bastard." Jalen hung up, adrenaline surging, pacing the room. The carpet was threadbare beneath his bare feet. By dawn, Mara texted his old phone, recovered from the precinct raids on Bobby's garage. Now Jalen hitched a ride with a trucker heading that way, a burly guy hauling lumber who didn't ask questions. He was dropped a block from the lot. Dawn broke gray over Baton Rouge as Jalen crept forward, the tow yard sprawling before him. A graveyard of rusted hulks and oil-stained gravel. Unmarked federal vans rolled in, silent, their lights off. Agents spilled out, weapons drawn, moving with purpose. From his hiding spot behind a dumpster, Jalen watched, the stench of rot curling in his throat. They pried open a garage bay, and there it was, the truck. A dented black Chevy, its front grille crumpled, mud caked thick on the tires, reeking of river water. Agents swarmed, snapping photos, dusting for prints. Jalen's chest loosened, a breath slipping free, a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Mara strode over, her buzz cut catching the rising sun, and nodded. "Got it, Jalen. Paint matches. Tire treads, too. Harov's linked." By noon, the news broke, judge tied to hit and run. Kira's blog blasted it first, then TV stations picked it up, footage of the truck flashing across screens citywide. Jalen slumped against the dumpster, relief washing over him. A rare lightness settled in his limbs. Harrov was cornered, the feds closing in, his kill shot foiled. Jalin had survived, turned the judge's own move against him. Then his phone buzzed. The sharp vibration shattered the moment. An unknown number flashed across the screen. He hesitated, then answered, his voice wary. "Yeah." A raspy voice slithered through the speaker, low and thick. "Drop the case, Carter, or she's dead." Jalin's blood ran cold. The stale motel air rushed back into his lungs, suffocating. "Who?" he snapped, but he already knew. "Tasha. Took her from the diner. Shift just ended. You back off or she doesn't come back." The line went dead. Silence hummed in his ear. Jalin's knees buckled. The phone slipped from his sliced hands, clattering onto the gravel. Tasha, his sister, snatched from her waitressing shift at the Blue Moon Diner, her apron probably still tangled in some booth. Harrov hadn't stopped. He had doubled down, taking family, again. But this time, he wasn't just burning homes, he was dangling death. Jalin's triumph, the truck, the news, the case, turned to ash in his mouth. He thought Harrov was finished. He wasn't. The judge had claws deeper than Jalin had imagined, striking when he least expected. The feds were raiding. The headlines were exploding. But Tasha was gone, and Jalin's world tilted again, the river's icy grip creeping back into his bones. He stood, gravel crunching under his sneakers, and stared at the phone. The unknown number burned into the screen. Harrov wasn't just fighting. He was hunting, turning Jalin's every win into a trap. The motel loomed behind him, a refuge turned cage. Beyond it, the city stretched, a battlefield where his sister's life hung on his next move. His hands trembled, sliced palms throbbing, but his jaw set, teeth grinding. Jalin had escaped the river, survived the truck. But this was different. This was Tasha, and Harrov knew it. The judge's smirk flickered in Jalin's mind, a taunt from the gala. This war was far from over. Jalin Carter stood frozen in the gravel lot outside the Bayou Rest Motel, the phone slipping from his wounded hands, clattering onto wet stones. The raspy voice's threat echoed in his skull. "Drop the case or she's dead." Tasha, his little sister, taken from the Blue Moon Diner, her shift ending just as the sun crept over Baton Rouge's skyline. The air hung heavy with the scent of rain and diesel. The motel's neon sign buzzed faintly behind him, its pink glow flickering like a dying pulse. His chest heaved, breath ragged. The river's chill still clung to his bones from the near-drowning hours ago, now joined by a deeper, colder dread twisting his gut. Harrov had her, or his goons did. And Jalin's victory? The truck, the news, the headline-breaking moment. It all crumbled under this new blow. His knees nearly gave out, but he caught himself, palms scraping gravel as he snatched the phone back up, staring at the blank screen, willing it to ring again. Give him something, anything. Nothing came, just the hum of the city waking up, oblivious to the war ripping his world apart. His mind raced, scrambling to piece it together. Tasha, 5 feet 2 inches, a laugh that could light up a room, working double shifts to save for nursing school. Gone, because Jalin had pushed too far. The gala confrontation, the feds raiding Bobby Ray's lot. It had cornered Harrov. Now he had lashed out. Jalin staggered to his feet, mud caking his sneakers, and stumbled back into the motel. The door slammed shut behind him. The sagging bed groaned under his weight as he collapsed onto it, hands shaking as he dialed Mara Dixon. Her number, a lifeline he'd clung to through every storm. She picked up, voice tight. "Jalin, we've got the truck locked down." Harrov's sweating. "Where are you?" He swallowed hard, throat raw. "They took Tasha, Mara, from the diner. Said I drop the case or she's dead." Mara's breath caught, a rare crack in her steel. "Jesus," she muttered. "Okay, we'll trace the call, get eyes on her. Just don't do anything stupid." Too late for that, Jalin thought, hanging up. His resolve hardened like concrete. He couldn't wait for the feds, not with Tasha's life ticking away. Harrov's deadline wasn't clear, but every second felt like a blade at her throat. Jalen grabbed the motel's notepad, his pencil stub trembling as he sketched a plan. The raspy voice, the timing, it screamed Harov's crew. And Jalen knew, the judge wouldn't back off unless he thought he'd won. Public retraction. That's what they wanted. A surrender. To kill the heat. Jalen's jaw clenched, teeth grinding. He dialed Kira, the rogue journalist. Her blog, his only shot. She picked up, her voice sleepy but sharp. "Carter, you're blowing up my stats." "What now?" He didn't waste time. "I need you to stream me live. Right now." Silence. Then, Kira's voice sharpened. "What? Why?" "They've got my sister," Jalen said flatly. "I'm retracting everything. But it's a play. Can you do it?"
Kira hesitated.
Then exhaled. "Give me 10 minutes. I'll set it up." "You sure, Carter?" Jalen nodded into the phone. "Dead sure." 10 minutes later, Jalen stood in the motel lot. Rain streaked his borrowed shirt. Kira's laptop balanced on a rusted picnic table, its webcam blinking red as she streamed Jalen live to her thousands of followers. His voice was rough, raw from the river, from the fear, but he forced it steady, locking his gaze on the lens. "This is Jalen Carter, Assistant U.S. Attorney. I've been pushing a case against Judge Samuel Harrove, claiming bias, corruption. I was wrong. The evidence, the truck, it's not what I thought. I'm dropping it all. Let this go." His hands trembled, fists clenched at his sides. Every word burned his throat, a betrayal of everything he had fought for. The chat exploded in a frenzy of disbelief and outrage, messages flashing too fast to read. "He's lying. They got to him." Jalen cut the feed. Kira's voice crackled through the laptop speaker. "It's live, Jalen. They're eating it up. Hope you know what you're doing." He didn't answer, slamming the laptop shut and praying that Harov's men were watching, that they were buying it. Hours dragged by. The motel room became a cage as Jalen paced, wearing the carpet thin beneath his restless steps. His sliced palms throbbed with every clench of his fists. Then, at noon, his phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. "She's at 412 Oak Street. Alone." Jalen's heart slammed against his ribs. Relief surged through him as he bolted out the door, hailing a cab from the motel lot. The driver, a grizzled man, barely glanced at Jalen's bruised, rain-soaked state before pulling away from the curb. The address led to a rundown duplex 10 miles out. Paint peeled in ragged strips from the siding, the windows boarded up with warped plywood. Jalen didn't hesitate. He kicked the door in, wood splintering under his heel. Inside, Tasha lay slumped on a stained couch, wrists bruised from tight ropes but alive. Her crumpled apron lay beside her. She looked up, eyes wide. "Jalen?" Her voice was hoarse. "They dumped me here. Said you quit." He dropped to his knees, pulling her into a tight hug, her sobs shaking them both. He whispered against her hair, "I didn't quit, Tash. It's a game." She nodded, wiping her face. Her voice was barely above a murmur. "They took me to a warehouse first, by the docks. It smelled like fish and cash." Jalen's pulse spiked. Her words were a gold mine. A warehouse, Harov's hideout. He got her safely to Miss Loretta's house, where their mother waited, then pulled out his phone, dialing Mara. His voice was sharp, urgent. "Tasha's back. Gave me a lead, a warehouse by the docks. Fish and cash. Get the task force there. Now." Mara didn't hesitate. "On it, Carter. Stay out of this one." But Jalen couldn't. Not after everything. The docks stretched before him, a sprawling maze of rusted cranes and rotting piers. The air was thick with salt, damp wood, and decay. From his hiding spot behind a stack of crates, Jalen watched as unmarked vans rolled in. The feds moved fast, silent, agents fanning out information. They breached a squat building, its sagging roof barely holding together. Minutes later, shouts erupted. Agents hauled out crates stuffed with cartel cash. Stacks of hundreds spilled onto the gravel. The filthy backbone of Harov's empire laid bare. 3 of his men were dragged out in cuffs, snarling, their cover blown. Jalen's chest swelled with triumph. They had him. News choppers circled above, cameras capturing the bust in real time. Harov's empire was cracking wide open, and Jalen had forced the break. Rain dripped from his hair as a grin tugged at his split lip. The gamble had paid off. The retraction had worked. A desperate bluff that freed Tasha and delivered this win. Mara strode over, boots crunching against the wet gravel. She clapped a firm hand on his shoulder. Good call, Jalen. We've got enough to tie Harov to this. Maybe sink him for good. He nodded, exhaustion weighing heavy now, but the high of the takedown kept him standing. Harov's men were in cuffs. The cash was evidence. Jalen had turned the tide. He could almost taste it. Harov's downfall, a reckoning for the fire, the river, the pain, for everything. He exhaled, closing his eyes, letting the rain wash over him. For a moment, he let himself believe it was over, that he had outmaneuvered the beast. Then, boom! The docks shook. A fireball ripped through the warehouse, flames spewing skyward in a violent eruption. The shockwave slammed into Jalen, knocking him flat. Gravel bit into his cheek as searing heat rolled over him. Screams cut through the chaos. Black smoke churned into the sky as agents scrambled. Two lay motionless, their bodies flung like rag dolls from the blast. Jalen's ears rang, a high-pitched whine drowning out the shouts, the sirens, the panic. Mara's voice cut through the static, sharp and urgent. Bomb! Rigged to blow. The cache evidence gone. Ash curling in the wind. And within hours, the story flipped. Federal prosecutor linked to deadly blast. Harov's men, miraculously released, pointed fingers. Jalen Carter, his badge, his name, now a curse. The victory was ripped away in a storm of fire and lies. Jalen staggered to his feet, the docks a war zone around him. And he realized Harov hadn't just struck back. He had turned Jalen's greatest win into a death sentence. Somewhere in the shadows, the judge was smiling. The dock reeked of burning rubber and diesel, a toxic haze thick in the air, choking Jalen's lungs as he staggered to his feet. The world tilted, his balance unsteady, but he forced himself forward, legs pumping despite the pain. He darted between rusted shipping containers, their shadows stretching long and jagged under the flickering firelight. In the distance, sirens wailed, growing closer. Jalen knew the feds wouldn't hesitate, not with two of their own dead, not with his name tied to the blast. Harov's lackeys, freed on some lawyer's sleight of hand, had flipped the narrative, painting Jalen as the one who set the bomb. A lie so brazen it stuck. He veered into a narrow alley, leaving the docks behind, the city's underbelly sprawling ahead. A warren of crumbling warehouses and neon-lit dives, where the law bent for the right price. His soaked shirt clung to his chest, borrowed jeans stiff with mud, and his sliced palms throbbed as he rummaged through a dumpster, pulling out a stolen phone, a discarded relic from a drunk at a bar 2 nights ago. His own phone was tapped. He'd known that much. Harov had turned him into prey. But Jalen wasn't just running. He was hunting, too. He ducked into a darkened doorway, rain drumming on the tin awning above, and dialed Rico, the only person he still trusted. Rico answered, voice tense. Jalen, man, you're all over the news. They're saying you blew up the docks. Jalen's breath hissed out, sharp and low. It was Harov, Rico. The bomb was his, not mine. I need a lead. Cartel snitch. Someone who's seen the judge dirty. A pause. Then the sound of keys clacking in the background. There's a guy, Miguel. Low-level mule. Got pinched last year. Word is, he saw Harov take a briefcase from a cartel boss, cash for a blind eye. He's holed up in a flop house on 3rd Street. Scared stiff. Jalen's pulse spiked. A lifeline in the dark. Get me there, Rico. And a recorder. I'm ending this. On it, Rico muttered, then hung up. Jalen slipped deeper into the shadows, the city's pulse thudding around him. 3rd Street was a graveyard of boarded-up shops and flickering streetlights. The flop house a sagging brick box with a busted sign reading, rooms $10. Midnight. Jalen crept inside, the stolen phone's flashlight cutting through the gloom. The air was thick with mold and stale beer. Miguel was in a back room, a wiry man with sunken eyes, his jittery leg bouncing as he paced near a cot littered with cigarette butts. He flinched when Jalen stepped in, hand darting toward a knife. Jalen raised his palms, voice steady. "I'm not here to hurt you, Miguel. I know about Harrove, the briefcase. Tell me, and I'll keep you safe." Miguel's eyes darted, sweat beading on his brow, but after a long pause, his fear cracked his defiance. The tiny black recorder, slipped to Jalen at a gas station drop, hummed in his pocket as Miguel spilled the truth. 2 years back, dockside.
Arrobe mete el toro. Cartel boss.
Took 50 grand to bury a drug bust. I saw it, man. Cash in hand. Judge was laughing like it was a joke. Jalen's grin was grim. The tape was rolling. Gold. He left Miguel with a burner number, promising protection, then hit the streets. Rico met him at a pawn shop 2 blocks over. A cluttered hole, thick with dust and desperation. From a backroom laptop, he hacked into Kira's blog, uploading the audio with a burner email. By dawn, it went viral. Cartel snitch exposes Judge Harrove. Miguel's voice crackled across the web, raw and unfiltered, spilling details, dates, names, the bribe. Jalen watched from a grimy payphone booth as the shares climbed. 10,000, then 20,000. Outside the Baton Rouge courthouse, protesters gathered, chants of justice now, ringing through the rain. News vans rolled in, cameras flashing. For the first time in days, Jalen breathed. He'd flipped the fugitive tag, turned the city's eyes back on Harrove. For a moment, just a moment, he thought he'd clawed his way out. Then, a crack split the air. A sniper's bullet grazed his shoulder, ripping through the borrowed jacket. Glass shattered around him as he dived behind the booth, pain searing his arm, blood soaking the sleeve. Boots pounded nearby. A cop stepped into the streetlight, rifle raised, badge glinting under the neon glow. His face was stone cold. "Self-defense!" he shouted, voice flat, before firing again. The bullet pinged off a dumpster as Jalen scrambled into an alley, his heart slamming, blood dripping onto the asphalt. Harrove's loyalists, Baton Rouge PD's worst. The judge had sent his own brand of justice, turning Miguel's tape into a target on Jalen's back. The cop advanced, radio crackling orders. Jalen bolted, weaving through trash-strewn alleys, every step a jolt of fire from the wound. He ducked into a storm drain, the reek of sewage wrapping around him. Crouching low, he pressed against the slick wall, water lapping at his knees as the cop's flashlight swept past, missing him by inches. His shoulder burned, the graze shallow but steady bleeding. Gritting his teeth, Jalen tore a strip from his shirt, tying it tight against the pain. The viral audio had hit Harrove hard, ignited riots. But the judge wasn't folding. He was doubling down, sending a hitman in blue to silence Jalen before the truth could sink deeper. Jalen leaned against the slimy wall, rain dripping through the grate above, catching his breath, mind racing. The protests were loud. The feds would dig. But Harrove's reach was a web ensnaring cops, killers, anyone he could buy. Jalen's badge was gone. His name was poison. And now his blood stained the streets, a fugitive's mark. He had turned the tide with Miguel's confession. But Harrove had flipped it back. A sniper's shot was proof he'd rather kill than lose. Jalen's hands shook, the recorder still in his pocket. A weapon he'd wield again. He'd survived the river. And he wasn't done yet. The bomb, then this. The cost was mounting, and Harrove's next move loomed like a storm on the horizon. The storm drain's echo swallowed Jalen's ragged breaths, the city's chaos above a distant roar. He pressed a hand to the wound, feeling the blood seeping through the makeshift bandage, and forced himself upright, the cold gnawing at his resolve. Harrove had Tasha free, the bribe money exposed, but he wouldn't stop. Not while Jalen was still breathing. The protests were just a spark. Jalen had to turn them into a wildfire, had to burn Harrove's world down before the next bullet found him. He slipped out of the drain, the shadows his only shield, while the sniper's boots faded into the night. But the threat lingered, a noose tightening with every step. Was Jalen's gamble with the snitch worth the deadly price? Comment number 1 if you think he's a hero for risking it all. Hit like if Harov's sniper twist has you reeling. And subscribe because this fugitive's fight is far from over. Could Jalen turn the riots into his salvation? Or would Harov's next move finish him for good? Keep watching because in this brutal Baton Rouge war, someone was bound to fall. Jalen Carter staggered through the storm drain, blood seeping from the sniper's graze. The bandage, hastily tied, was already soaked through, peeling loose beneath his borrowed jacket. The sewer stench clawed at his throat, a rancid mix of rot and rainwater swirling around his knees. But he pushed forward, each step jarring pain through his body. Above, Baton Rouge roared. A city on fire, protests raging in the wake of Miguel's viral confession. The snitch's words had torn through Judge Samuel Harov's armor like a knife through soft flesh. Jalen's breath rasped as he climbed out through a rusted hatch, emerging into a back alley where rain turned the pavement into a slick, oil-slicked mirror. Distant flames glowed in the reflections. His sneakers squelched in the mud as he pressed a trembling hand to his wound, the sting keeping his focus sharp. He dodged a cop's bullet, but Harov wasn't done. The judge's next move was coming, and Jalen had to be faster. He limped toward the safe house, a crumbling shotgun shack on the outskirts of town, its clapboard walls peeling under a sagging roof. Mara Dixon had texted him the address on his stolen burner phone, a last lifeline after the dock's explosion. Jalen slipped inside, the rusted door hinges groaning in protest. The air smelled of damp wood and stale grease. A single bulb swung from a frayed cord, casting jittery shadows across a scarred wooden table. Mara was already there, her buzzed hair glinting as she shoved a first aid kit across to him, eyes narrowing at his bloodied state. "You look like hell, Carter," she said, voice clipped, tossing him a half-full bottle of water. It sloshed in his shaking grip as he twisted the cap off. Jalen ripped open the kit, antiseptic and gauze spilling onto the table. He patched his shoulder with practiced hands, wincing as the alcohol seared the wound. "Harov's sniper," he muttered, tying the bandage tight. "After Miguel's tape went live, he's not slowing down." Mara nodded, pulling a duffel bag from under the table, stuffed with fresh bandages, another burner phone, and a Glock she'd lifted from evidence lockup. "The feds are spinning it," she said. "Two dead at the docks, and you're their scapegoat." But that audio lit a fire. "We've got a shot." Jalen gulped the water, the cold shocking his throat, and leaned back, the chair groaning under his weight. Outside, the city burned. Protesters filled the streets, their chants echoing into the night, demanding justice. Miguel's confession had been a bomb of its own, detailing the judge's $50,000 bribe from the El Toro cartel, a deal sealed with a smug laugh. Kira's blog had sent it viral, 20,000 shares, then 50, the audio replaying on every news station. Jalen's lips twitched, the faintest grin breaking through the pain. He might be a fugitive, but the city was shifting. The storm was turning in his favor. Mara cracked her knuckles. "I've got a grand jury lined up. Remote testimony. If we tie the sniper to Harov, we've got ballistics from the alley. Enough for an indictment." Jalen nodded, adrenaline surging through his battered body. He grabbed the burner phone, dialing into the secure line Mara had rigged. The grand jury feed crackled to life on her laptop, a grainy video link showing 20 faces staring back from a sealed room. Jalen took a slow breath and spoke, his voice hoarse but steady. "I'm Jalen Carter, Assistant U.S. Attorney, now a wanted man. Harov's behind the docks bombing. The sniper who shot me? Ballistics match a Baton Rouge PD rifle, issued to Officer Trent Lane. Harov's cousin by marriage. Miguel's tape proves the judge took cartel cash, and now he's killing to cover it up." He held up the recorder, its black casing scratched but intact, and hit play. Miguel's voice crackled through the speakers. "Harov met El Toro Doside 2 years back. 50 grand. Buried a bust. Saw it myself. Cash in hand. Judge laughing like it was a joke." The jurors shifted. Murmurs rippled through the feed. Jalen felt the weight of it, the truth landing like a gavel. Mara sent the ballistics report, a digital file pinging through. By noon, word came down. Harrove had been indicted, charged with corruption, conspiracy, murder. Jalen exhaled sharply, the safe house's damp air cooling his lungs. Mara clapped his uninjured shoulder. He's done, Carter. Arrest warrants out. The news spread like wildfire. TV stations blared. Judge indicted in cartel scandal. Footage rolled of the riots swelling. Crowds smashing windows, torching effigies of Harrove's face. Jalen watched from the safe house window, a crack in the glass splitting his reflection. His shoulder throbbed, but relief settled over him. A tide he hadn't felt since this nightmare began. The raid, the fire, the river, Tasha's kidnapping, the bomb, the sniper, all of it led here, Harrove's empire crumbling, the feds closing in. His name might finally be clearing. He sank into a chair, the wood creaking beneath him, and let his eyes close for just a moment. He had won. The storm would take Harrove and leave him standing. Then Mara's phone buzzed, sharp, insistent. She answered, face hardening. A second later, she hung up, eyes locking onto his. Harrove's lawyer just aired a video, she said. Jalen's stomach dropped. It's you, she said, confessing, saying you planted Miguel's tape, set the bomb, framed him. It's everywhere. The narrative had flipped overnight. Jalen's stomach twisted, the room spinning as he snatched the burner phone and pulled up a news stream. There he was, or a version of him. His face rendered flawlessly, his voice eerily identical, confessing, I faked it all. The snitch, the cash. I set up Harrove. The docs, that was me. The footage was seamless, an AI-forged lie so polished it stuck. Comments flooded in. Carter's a fraud. Harrove's the victim. Jalen's fist slammed against the table, the Glock rattling beside him as he roared. That's not me, Mara. It's deepfake garbage. Mara's expression was grim. Public's buying it, Jalen. The protests are shifting. They're hunting you now. He bolted to the window, peering through the cracked glass. Outside, the crowd was changing. Signs once raised in his defense now dropped, replaced with fists and jeers. The safe house walls seemed to close in, the flickering bulb overhead sputtering like a warning. Harrove's indictment was real, the warrant out. But this video had flipped everything. In hours, Baton Rouge had turned against him. News anchors were pivoting. Federal prosecutors' hoax exposed. Jalen Carter's name was poison again, worse than before. His shoulder throbbed, blood seeping through the bandages. He pressed down, the sting keeping him grounded as his mind raced. Harrove's empire had cracked but not crumbled. The judge had claws in places Jalen couldn't reach, tech wizards weaving lies faster than he could fight. The grand jury victory, the protests, it had all felt final. But Harrove had stolen it back, turning Jalen's storm into a noose. He exhaled sharply, sinking into the chair as it creaked beneath him. Across the table, Mara leaned forward, frustration and resolve tightening her face. We have the ballistics, the tape. It's still real, she said, her voice low. But this video is louder, Jalen. We need more fast, or you're done. Jaw tight, teeth grinding, he nodded. He tucked the Glock into his waistband, its weight a cold comfort. Outside, the city burned. But now it burned for him. A fugitive twice over, hunted by the feds and the mob alike. Harrove's deepfake had rewritten the script. The judge was now the martyr. Jalen, the villain. His sister was safe, his mother alive, but his fight was slipping through his fingers. The truth buried beneath a lie so perfect it gleamed. He stood, rain streaking the window, and grabbed the duffel. The safe house was compromised. Harrove wasn't just surviving, he was winning. And Jalen's next move was all he had left. A thread stretched thin in a storm threatening to snap. The shack's door banged shut behind him. The night swallowed his shadow as he disappeared into Baton Rouge's chaos. The protests had become a manhunt, his name now a curse. His shoulder ached, blood dampening his sleeve, but his eyes burned with determination. Harrove had turned the tide. But Jalin wasn't drowning yet. The indictment stood. The feds were closing in. He just had to find a way to turn it all back around, to burn Harrove's lies to ash. The city's rage had been his weapon once. He'd wield it again. One last time. Jalin Carter slipped through Baton Rouge's rain-soaked streets. The city's chaos, a living beast howling around him. What had been a fight for justice had become a manhunt. His name spit from furious lips. His shoulder throbbed, the sniper's bullet wound bleeding through the gauze beneath his stolen jacket. Every step sent jolts of pain up his arm. He ducked into a narrow alley off 4th Street, Mara's duffel slung over his good shoulder, the Glock knocking against his hip with every move. The safe house was no longer safe. He scaled a rusted fire escape, its rungs slick with rain, and hauled himself into an attic above an old barber shop on Claiborne Street. His father's place had once stood on this block, before Harrove's fire had swallowed it whole. The attic reeked of dust and mildew. Rain dripped through cracks in the ceiling. Jalin collapsed onto a pile of musty blankets, his breath ragged, blood staining the fabric beneath him. The deepfake, Harrove's AI-crafted lie, had turned the city against him, twisting his grand jury victory into a death sentence. He powered up the laptop Rico had stashed there for him. Its screen cast a pale glow over his bruised face. He pulled up the news feeds, his stomach tightening at the headlines. Carter confesses to hoax. 2 feds dead. The fake video looped on every station. His face, his voice, perfect forgery. I framed Harrove, planted Miguel's tape, set the docs bomb. Just hours ago, protesters had chanted for justice. Now they smashed windows, his name scrawled in red across brick walls. Their fury, once aimed at Harrove, had been redirected by his digital deception. Jalin's fists clenched. The burner phone buzzed with Mara's texts. Feds are split. Videos got traction. Lay low. He hurled the phone against a wooden beam, the screen cracking on impact. The indictment still stood, but this lie was louder. He needed more, something to flip it back. Rico had slipped him a lead before the sniper attack, a mole in the feds, someone feeding Harrove information. Jalin's gut twisted. Betrayal left a bitter taste in his mouth as he scrolled through his team's roster. Names blurred until one stuck. Lena Price, junior agent, sharp, quiet, always at his side during the cartel case. She'd been at the docks. She'd seen the bomb prep, yet her reports had been too clean. Jalin's jaw tightened as he hacked into her email using Rico's backdoor code. Messages flooded the screen. There it was, a thread to an unlisted account. Wire transfers, 10 grand, sent from a shell company tied to Harrove's cousin, Bobby Ray. Days before the deepfake dropped, Jalin exhaled slowly. Lena had sold him out. She'd fed the judge his moves, built the lie that turned him into a fugitive. Rage boiled under his skin, but he forced himself to stay cold. Years in law had sharpened his edges. At dusk, he slipped out into the streets, the storm cloaking him as he hitched a ride in a delivery van. The driver barely glanced at him, too tired to question the blood staining his clothes. Lena Price's apartment was a 3rd-floor walk-up in a crumbling complex off Florida Boulevard. Stucco walls cracked. The stairwell reeked of piss and burned grease. Jalin climbed, his pulse steady. He wasn't done yet. Jalin picked the lock, the Glock steady in his grip as he slipped inside. The air was thick with the scent of lavender, a candle flickering on the counter. She was there, curled up on the couch, a glass of wine in hand, dark hair spilling loose over her shoulders. Her eyes widened as he kicked the door shut. "Jalin? What the hell?" she stammered, wine sloshing over the rim as she scrambled to her feet. He leveled the gun, voice low and unyielding. "Don't play dumb, Lena. I have your emails, the payments. You sold me to Harrove, helped build that video." Her face crumpled, hands shaking as she sank back onto the couch. The wine glass slipped from her grip, shattering against the floor, red liquid spreading across the rug. "I didn't want this," she whispered, tears streaking her face. "He threatened my kid, Jalin. Said he'd take her if I didn't cooperate. Jalen's fingers tightened around the Glock, his anger unwavering. But her words hit a crack in his fury. He had trained her, trusted her. And now, she was just another pawn in Harov's game, coerced or not. "Prove it," he growled, tossing a recorder onto the couch. The red light blinked as he hit record. "Talk, Lena, or I take this to the feds right now." She swallowed, her voice trembling as she spilled everything. "Harov's got a network, Jalen. Cops, tech guys, cartel money. Bobby Ray paid me to leak your moves. Said it was the only way to keep my daughter safe. The video, they made it in a basement off Perkins. AI Drake processed it in 2 days. I gave them your voice files from old briefings." Jalen's stomach churned, the betrayal sinking deeper. But he pushed her, the recorder rolling. "Who's running it?" She hesitated, then murmured, "Trent Lane, the sniper, and a guy named Vickers.
XNSA.
He's the one building the fakes." Jalen stopped the recording, pocketing the device as he lowered the gun. Lena's quiet sobs filled the silence. "You're done, Lena," he said, voice flat. Then he turned and walked out, the door slamming shut behind him. Her cries faded as he took the stairs 2 at a time. He met Rico at an abandoned gas station, the lot a graveyard of rusted pumps and shattered glass. The night was thick with fog rolling off the Mississippi. Rico worked fast, uploading Lena's confession to Kira's blog from a hacked hotspot. The audio hit the internet at midnight. Fed Mole confesses. Judge linked to deepfake scandal. It spread like wildfire, shares skyrocketing past 30,000. News stations scrambled to pivot, reporters playing Lena's voice as she detailed Harov's bribe network, the basement rig, the threats. Jalen stood in a fogged-up phone booth, watching as the truth finally aired. Carter cleared. Judge's lies exposed. The mob's fury turned again, this time back on Harrove. Protests reignited. The courthouse steps swarmed with signs. By dawn, the news broke, Harove's bail revoked. The judge locked up, pending trial. A rare smile crossed Jalen's face, teeth flashing in the dim booth light. Victory was close enough to taste. But then, the safe house shuddered. A deafening roar split the night as flames erupted beneath the barber shop attic. Heat and smoke rushed upward, the fire devouring the space in seconds. Jalen grabbed the duffel, coughing as he kicked open a trapdoor, tumbling onto the floor below. The fire licked up the walls, glass shards from a Molotov cocktail glittering in the blaze. He stumbled outside, singed but alive. The street was chaos. A mob swarmed. Harov's last loyalists, faces twisted in rage, screaming his name. They'd tracked him, torched his refuge. A final strike from a judge who wouldn't quit, even behind bars. Jalen ran, the duffel slamming against his hip, flames chasing him into the night. The mob closed in, fists raised. A trap, just when he thought he'd won. His shoulder throbbed, blood seeping through the gauze, and his breath burned in his lungs. The city's storm was shifting again, turning against him. He ducked into a vacant lot, weeds tangling his legs as he crouched behind a rusted-out car. The mob's shouts faded into the crackle of fire. His hands trembled. The recorder was still in his pocket. Lena's voice, a weapon that had cleared him. But it wasn't enough. Harov's reach stretched from lockup. His loyalists were still out there, hunting him. The attic was gone. Rico's laptop ashes. Jalen's smirk disappeared, replaced by a grimace as he pressed his wound, blood slicking his fingers. He had flipped the narrative, turned the city back in his favor, and Harrove had countered with fire. The judge's empire was cracking, but it wasn't dead yet. And Jalen was cornered, the mob's rage a wall he couldn't scale. He gripped the Glock, its cold steel grounding him, and slipped deeper into the shadows. The fire's glow behind him was a warning. If he faltered now, he was finished. Jalen Carter leapt from the attic window, flames licking at his heels as he hit the pavement below. The impact sent pain searing through his wounded shoulder, his vision blurring for half a second. The night air was thick with smoke and the acrid stench of burning gasoline. The Molotov-fueled blaze roared behind him, consuming the safe house where he'd thought he had turned the tide against Judge Samuel Harrove. His borrowed jacket was scorched, the edges curling black from the heat. The duffel banged against his hip as he pushed himself up, gravel digging into his palms. Behind him, the mob surged. A pack of Harrove's loyalists, their faces contorted with fury, fists clutching bricks and bottles. They were hunting him. He sprinted, weaving through vacant lots, ducking behind a rusted-out sedan. His breath came in ragged gasps, lungs burning. The city's storm had turned on him again. Lena's confession had been a fleeting victory, wiped out by fire and fury. But Jalen wasn't done. Not yet. He slipped into a side street, the sagging shotgun shacks casting long shadows over him. His fingers curled tight around the Glock, the metal slick with sweat and blood. His shoulder ached, the gauze soaked through, but his focus stayed sharp. He scanned for an escape, a path through the chaos. Harrove's indictment stood. His bail was gone, but the judge's reach still stretched far beyond his cell. His loyalists were relentless, striking even now. Jalen's grip tightened around the recorder in his pocket, Lena's confession. His last weapon. One more time. He would use it. He knew how this would end, the courthouse. Harrove's hearing, a public stage meant to bury the judge once and for all. Jalen sprinted, rain streaking his face. The city's pulse was like a war drum as he cut through alleys. The mob's roar was distant but never fully gone. His sneakers slapped against the wet asphalt, mud splattering on his jeans as he pushed past the pain. The duffel bag was a lifeline he refused to drop. The Baton Rouge courthouse loomed ahead, a cold gray monolith under the harsh floodlights. Its steps were crowded with protesters, their signs now boldly reading Harrove guilty in red. Jalen slipped through the crowd, hood pulled low, the Glock hidden under his jacket. He flashed Mara's passcode to a guard and slipped past security, unnoticed. The hearing was in full swing, the courtroom buzzing with murmurs, the air thick with tension. Harrove sat at the defendant's table, his buzz cut gleaming under the lights, his ruddy face calm despite the cuffs. Jalen stormed in, the duffel thudding to the floor as he strode to the witness stand. Ignoring the bailiff's shout to identify himself, he slammed the recorder onto the stand and hit play. Lena's voice crackled loudly. Harrove's got a network, cops, tech guys, cartel money. Bobby Ray paid me. The video's fake. Trent Lane's the sniper. The room erupted in gasps and shouts. Harrove lunged from his seat, his chair crashing to the floor. Lies. All of it. You black bastard. I'll bury you. The slur hit like a whip, raw and unfiltered. The courtroom froze, every eye on the judge as his mask shattered. Spit flew from his lips. Jalen stood tall, 5 feet 10 inches, but towering now as his brown eyes locked onto Harrove's blue. The recorder kept rolling, capturing the judge's outburst, which sealed his fate. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras flashed from the gallery. The jury's faces hardened, disgust carving lines into their stares. The prosecutor, a wiry man with glasses, shot to his feet, voice sharp. Your Honor, the defendant's conduct proves intent. It corroborates the witness. The gavel slammed down. The presiding judge, an older woman with gray curls, barked, Silence! Harrove, sit down. But Harrove didn't listen. His fists slammed the table, veins bulging as he screamed, He's a fraud, a thug. This is my court. Jalen's chest swelled. The weight of the room shifted as the truth landed like a boulder on Harrove's crumbling empire. Lena's tape, Miguel's snitch, the ballistics, the cash. Everything clicked. Harrove's rant was just the final nail driven in by his own hate. The jury deliberated fast. 30 minutes ticking by as Jalen sat, shoulder bleeding through his shirt, the duffel at his feet. Mara slipped in from the back, nodding at him. Her buzz cut stood out in the crowd. The verdict came, guilty on all counts. Corruption, conspiracy, murder. The words hit like thunder as Harrove slumped in his chair, his ruddy face draining to ashen gray. The gallery erupted, Cheers and jeers blending as deputies dragged him off, his cuffs clinking as he spat threats. "This ain't over, Carter. You're dead." Jalin stood steady despite the pain. Justice had been served in a courtroom that had once fined him $750 for being black and late. That fine had been a spark. This was the fire, and Harrove had burned in it. Jalin stepped outside. The cool night air hit his sweat-soaked skin, and the crowd's cheers of victory washed over him. He leaned against the courthouse steps, exhaustion hitting him in waves. His shoulder ached, blood dripping onto the stone, but he smiled, a rare curve of his lips. He thought of Tasha safe, Miss Evelyn alive, the city awake to Harrove's rot. The judge was locked away, his empire reduced to dust. And Jalin had won. He'd clawed through raids, fires, rivers, bombs, snipers, and mobs to stand here. Alive, unbroken. He closed his eyes, the Glock heavy in his pocket, the recorder a trophy of a war he'd fought and finished. The storm had passed. Baton Rouge was his again. He breathed deep, the weight lifting, believing for a moment that he could rest, that Harrove's threats were hollow echoes from a defeated man. Then his phone buzzed, jolting him from the silence. The stolen burner lit up with Mara's name. He answered, his voice rough. "Yeah." Her reply was urgent, low, and panicked. "Jalin, it's your mom and Tasha. They've been attacked at Loretta's. Harrove's cronies just hit them hard. They're in ICU, critical." Jalin's knees buckled. The phone slipped from his grip, the courthouse steps blurring in front of him as his breath caught in his throat. He'd won. Harrove was cuffed, but the judge's last loyalists, freed on technicalities, had struck a final, racist blow to his family. He ran, shoving through the crowd, the duffel banging against his leg. His sneakers slapped against the wet pavement as he sprinted toward the hospital, 10 blocks away. Rain mixed with blood on his hands, the city's victory turning sour as sirens wailed around him. Tasha's laugh, his mother's cough, flashed in his mind, now silenced by fists and hate. He burst into the ICU. The sterile air hit his lungs, the beeping of machines a cruel rhythm. He found them. Miss Evelyn in one bed, her face swollen, ribs cracked. Tasha in another, her arm in a cast, bruises blooming purple across her jaw. Doctors hovered, speaking in low tones, stable but critical. Jalin sank between them, hands shaking as he gripped their bedsides. Guilt clawed at his chest. Harrove's cronies, 3 ex-cops, had been cut loose after the docs had ambushed Loretta's duplex. It was payback for the courtroom, a message from a judge who'd lost but wouldn't stop. Jalin's victory felt hollow. Justice had been served, but his family was broken. Their blood was on his hands just as much as Harrove's. He pressed his forehead to Tasha's bed, tears burning his eyes. The Glock was useless now. The recorder was silent. The hospital hummed around him, nurses rushing by as the night stretched on. His shoulder bled through his shirt, but it went unnoticed. Harrove was caged, but his hate lived on, striking from the shadows. Jalin couldn't reach it. The fine, the raid, the fire, the river, the bomb, the sniper, the mob. All of it had led here to this win that had cost him everything. His breath slowed, resolve solidifying into a vow to hunt down those cronies and end this for good. But for now, he remained still. The beeps of machines were the only sound, the city's storm a distant rumble. Harrove's last laugh was a wound deeper than any bullet. Jalin Carter sat hunched between 2 hospital beds in the Baton Rouge ICU, the sterile air thick with antiseptic. The steady beep of machines sliced through the silence, counting down his guilt, like a metronome. Miss Evelyn lay in one bed, her fragile body swallowed by a thin gown, her face swollen and purple from the fists of Harrove's cronies. Her chest rose shallowly with each labored breath. Tasha rested in the other, her arm in a cast, bruises blooming across her jaw. Her eyes were closed but twitched under her lids, as if trapped in a nightmare. Jalin's hands gripped the bed rails, knuckles white, his sliced palms stinging beneath fresh bandages. A nurse had slapped them on when he'd stumbled in, soaked in rain and blood. His shoulder throbbed. The snipers graze a dull ache beneath the wounds, but it was nothing compared to the weight crushing his chest. A boulder of rage and sorrow pinned him here, watching his family pay for his war. The courtroom victory, the guilty verdict for Harrove, had felt final, like the gavel had slammed shut on the judge's reign. But this attack, the brutal ambush at Miss Loretta's duplex, was proof that the beast still had teeth. Even caged, he was dangerous. The clock on the wall ticked past 3 a.m., its hands bent and smudged, a relic in this fluorescent purgatory where time stretched thin. Jalen's borrowed jacket hung damp on a chair, singed from the fire at the safe house. The duffel at his feet, stuffed with the Glock and the recorder, Lena's taped confession now a hollow trophy, sat beside him. He had dragged Harrove down in that packed courthouse. The judge's slurs and threats had sealed his fate before a jury that didn't flinch. Guilty on all counts: corruption, conspiracy, murder. A life sentence looming as deputies hauled him off, his buzzcut vanishing behind steel doors. Jalen had stood tall then, the city's cheers a bomb, thinking he had burned Harrove's empire to ash. But hours later, those 3 ex-cops, released on technicalities after the docks bomb had struck, had come for his mother and sister. Fists and boots raining down, a final racist blow from a judge who had lost but wouldn't bow. Jalen's eyes burned with tears he wouldn't let fall as he pressed his forehead to Tasha's bed. Her cast was cold against his skin. He whispered, "I'm sorry, Tash. I thought it was over." A nurse shuffled in, her sneakers squeaking on the tile as she checked the monitors with quick, practiced hands. "They're stable," she said, her voice soft but firm. "But it's touch and go. Ribs cracked on your mom, concussion on your sister. They'll pull through, but they need rest." Jalen nodded, his throat too tight to speak. The nurse left, the door clicking shut behind her. Stable but critical. A fragile thread he clung to, guilt gnawing deeper with every beep. He had pushed Harrove, exposed him, flipped the city's storm. But at what cost? His mother's house was ash. Tasha's diner shift, a kidnapping, now this, his family's bodies broken because he dared to stand. The fine $7.50 for being late had sparked this. A petty jab that spiraled into a war, leaving his family bleeding. He gripped the recorder, its scratched shell warm in his hand, and vowed to hunt down those cronies, to end Harrove's shadow for good. But for now he stayed, a sentinel in the quiet. The hum of the hospital was his only companion. By dawn, sunlight crept through the blinds, painting thin gold lines across the floor. Jalen stood, stretching his stiff legs. The ache in his shoulder flared as he paced. Mara Dixon slipped in, her buzz cut glinting under the lights. Her suit was rumpled from a night chasing leads. "Jalen," she said, her voice low, "we've got IDs on the attackers. Trent Lane, sniper from the alley, and 2 others, XPD Harrove's dogs. They're on the run, but we're closing in. You okay?" He shook his head, his eyes flicking to the beds. "They're not," he whispered. "This is on me, Mara." She stepped closer, clapping his good shoulder. Her grip was firm. "It's on Harrove, not you. He's locked up. Sentencing's tomorrow. Life, no parole. We'll get these bastards too." Jalen nodded, his jaw tight. She handed him a coffee, its heat seeping through the cup into his chilled hands. "Rest," she said. "Then we finish this." She left, her boots echoing down the hall. Jalen sipped the bitter taste, grounding himself as he planned his next move. He stayed through the day, nurses rotating in and out, machines beeping steadily. Miss Evelyn's eyes fluttered open. Her voice was a rasp. "Jalen, baby, you're here." He squeezed her hand gently, despite the bandages, and smiled. Just a crack in his grim mask. "Always, Mom." Tasha stirred hours later, groaning as she woke. Her bruised face twisted in pain. "They came out of nowhere," she whispered. "Said it was for you." Jalen's gut twisted, but he kept his voice soft. "They're gone now, Tash. I've got you. They stabilized you. The doctors say you're critical but improving." By nightfall, Jalen stepped out of the hospital, the antiseptic sting fading as he hit the muggy Baton Rouge air. Harov's sentencing was set for 8 a.m. A press circus he'd face, a chance to speak, to bury the judge even deeper. He crashed at a cheap motel nearby, the Bayou's twin, its sheets scratchy but clean. He slept fitfully, dreams of fire and fists jolting him awake. At 7 a.m. he showered, the lukewarm water stinging his cuts, and pulled on a fresh shirt from the duffel. The Glock tucked in his waistband, a shadow he couldn't shed. He drove to the courthouse in a borrowed sedan from Rico, the engine rumbling low as he parked a block away. The steps were already swarmed with cameras and protesters, their signs a forest of rage and hope. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged, tighter than the hearing. Every seat was filled with reporters, locals, and federal agents, the air thick with sweat and anticipation. Harrove sat cuffed and silent, his ruddy face etched with defiance, his blue eyes gleaming as Jalin took the stand. His voice was steady, despite the ache in his body. "I'm Jalin Carter, Assistant U.S. Attorney," he began. "Harrove fined me $750 for being 3 minutes late. A black man in his court. It wasn't about time, it was about hate. He raided my mother's house, burned it, framed me, bombed the dock, shot at me, kidnapped my sister, and attacked my family again. He's guilty and this city knows it. Sentence him harshly for every life he's destroyed." The room erupted in applause and shouts, drowning out the gavel as Harrove glared, fists clenched, silenced by his own defeat. The judge, stern and gray-haired, leaned forward, his voice cutting through the noise. "Samuel Harrove, for corruption, conspiracy, and murder. This court sentences you to life without parole, effective immediately." The gavel slammed, a crack that echoed in Jalin's skull. Harrove stood, deputies pulling him up as his buzz cut vanished once again behind the steel doors, while the crowd cheered. A tide of vindication washed over Jalin as he stepped down. Mara nodded from the back, slipping out as the press swarmed. Jalin dodged microphones, his shoulders screaming, but he ignored them. Outside, he leaned against the sedan as rain began to fall. He pulled out the recorder, its weight now a relic of the war he'd fought. One he would speak of later, at a press conference set for noon. A chance to vow reform, to turn this into something greater. A system cracked open by one man's fight. For now, he breathed, the city storm his shield. He believed Harrove's cage was locked tight, his cronies next on the list. Then his phone buzzed. The stolen burner jolted in his pocket. Mara's name flashed.
Urgent.
He answered, voice rough. "What now?" Her reply was a shout, static crackling through. "Jalin, Harrove's gone. The cartel sprung him from transport. They killed a guard. He's loose." Jalin's knees buckled, the sedan catching him as his breath stopped. Rain streaked his face as he rasped. 10 minutes ago, ambush on the highway. They're gone, Jalin. He's vanished. He hung up, the phone slipping from his hand, shattering as his world tilted again. He stumbled to the driver's seat, hands shaking as he started the engine. The courthouse faded in the rearview mirror, the protesters oblivious to the reversal unfolding. Harrove, free. A ghost with cartel muscle. His life sentence now a mockery. A guard's blood on the asphalt, proof he'd never stop. Jalin sped back to the hospital, tires screeching on wet streets. The ICU's hum was a sanctuary turned trap. He burst in, finding Tasha and Miss Evelyn stable, nurses guarding them tightly. He sank between their beds, the duffel thudding to the floor as he pulled out the Glock. Its weight a vow as he watched the door, every shadow a threat. His phone buzzed again, an unknown number. He answered, voice a growl, a familiar rasp laughed through. "Thought you won, Carter? This ain't over. I'm coming." The line cut and Jalin froze. The recorder was useless now. The Glock his only shield. A note slipped under the door hours later, scrawled in black ink. "This isn't over." He snatched it, the paper crumpling in his fist, and stared at the words. Harrove's taunt. Promise of endless war. The hospital lights flickered, the beep steady but hollow as Jalin stood, gun in hand, eyes scanning the hall. Harov's escape had flipped everything, victory to dread. The judge, a phantom now, free to hunt him forever. Mara called, voice frantic. We're tracking him, Jalin. The cartels got him deep. We'll find him. But Jalin knew better. The system he'd fought, an entity leaking Harrov back into the world. His family was stabilized, but the cost was eternal. A shadow he couldn't kill. He stared at the note, rain drumming outside, and realized this war had no end. The finest spark that had burned his life to this. He was now a battered, bleeding federal prosecutor facing a ghost who'd never die. The city's storm raged on, but Jalin's fight was just beginning. Harov's laugh was a chain he'd never break. This gripping tale of Jalin Carter's battle against Judge Samuel Harrov reveals profound truths about resilience, systemic injustice, and the cost of standing up. First, it shows that courage can ignite change, even against overwhelming odds. Jalin, a black federal prosecutor, faced a racist judge who fined him unjustly, sparking a war that exposed corruption and rallied a city. His refusal to bow, despite raids, fires, and near-death experiences, proves that one voice can crack a rotten system. Second, it underscores the brutal reality of entrenched power. Harov's retaliation, burning homes, framing Jalin, orchestrating a cartel escape, highlights how deeply racism and privilege can dig, striking back harder when threatened. Justice isn't a straight path. It's a fight through mud and blood. Third, the story teaches that victory often comes with sacrifice. Jalin won in court, but his family paid the price in bruises and ICU beds. A reminder that personal costs can haunt even the righteous. Finally, it warns that evil doesn't vanish quietly. Harov's escape, a final twist, shows that defeating one villain doesn't end the war. Vigilance is eternal. For us, the lesson is clear. Stand firm, but know the stakes. Jalin's journey inspires action against bias, yet cautions preparedness for the backlash. It's a call to question authority, dig for truth, and protect what matters, even when the system bends against you. So, what's your take?
Comment below?
Should Jalin keep fighting Harov's shadow, or has he earned peace? Hit like if his grit moves you, subscribe for more tales of justice, and share to spark this conversation. Thanks for joining this wild ride.